Good afternoon, and welcome to this afternoon's panel on administrative team structures, workflows, and content management. I am your session chair, Cynthia, Cyrus, and I'm also our first panelist. The group that you have up here, and I'll let each of them introduce themselves in a moment, was assembled by our Coursera partners and happily came together with a variety of perspectives on the issue of how we do our business, trying to keep Coursera things going at our own institutions. So we'll each take a particular role as our focus of attention, but talk about our institutional similarities and differences as far as workflows are concerned. So as I said, I'm Cynthia Cyrus. I am Associate Provost for Undergraduate Education at Vanderbilt University. As that suggests, I also have responsibility for other duties as design, or I wouldn't be here today. Michael.
Oh, I'm Michael McCracken. I'm the Director of Online Course Development and Innovation for the Center for 21st Century Universities at Georgia Tech. That means I'm stuck with trying to develop all of our online courses with Coursera.
I'm Shawn Miller. I'm head of e-learning tools and strategy for Duke. Half the time I'm working with Sakai and other learning management tools on campus, and half the time I'm managing half of our Coursera enterprise.
I'm Jennifer Smith. I'm the manager of the UFIT Instructional Design Services at the University of Florida. And that means that I primarily work with faculty to develop materials. However, we also assist with faculty development and, of course, Coursera.
Great. A little bit about today's logistics. We're supposed to be done in 50 minutes. Wish us luck. So we'll all be giving short presentations and then taking questions at the end. Yeah, I'm the first one, but I'm going to present. Oh, you can't see me on that side, can you? All right. So I guess we'll all stand up so that everyone in the room can see us. The role I'm talking about is that of faculty, because without faculty you don't have a Coursera course. Of course, a faculty member needs a dozen other people to have their back, and I'll talk about that just briefly at the end. But I'm going to start today with talking to the faculty about why Coursera, what it is that we're doing with these digital learning platforms, and what it is that institutionally we want them to do. Got 4 big points. It's not about the money. When an institution decides to take on Coursera offerings, it should be really clear that we are not in it in a for-profit kind of way, because I can tell you, having looked at my budget, that I have not made money this year. It's a good idea. But it's a good idea institutionally for a variety of reasons that the faculty need to be reminded of. It's a form of university outreach. It's great community engagement. And by community, we really mean that global community that we always reference. It's about our alumni. And our alumni base and their support for the Coursera initiative is huge and exciting and takes up large strands of Facebook posts. And it's about exposure. We want our institution to be a named institution in any of a dozen different countries. This is an easy way to do so. So for our faculty, it's important that they know that some of the team partners putting together a Coursera platform for us institutionally will include groups like News and Public Affairs and the Development and Alumni Office. Those are members of our online education task force, because the work that we do with those groups is going to lead to the enrollments that are going to be valuable to them in their teaching. It's good for the institution, it's good for the department, and it's good for the individual faculty member. You should want this kind of exposure. In other words, when you're looking for a faculty member, you are not looking for a shrinking violet. But then again, as you're talking with your faculty, you need to remind them that it's about the money. So there are all of these parts of putting together a digital learning offering that are going to have to do with money, if not now, in the future. Faculty are really, really curious about what we mean by revenue share. But it's also important to remind them that the department's ability to recruit that top-notch graduate student from abroad is going to be impacted by the visibility of their department in a Coursera context. It's important also that you talk to your faculty about the direct support that you are going to provide that star individual as they are putting together the Coursera course, because they're not going to do it alone. And each of us will talk a little bit about our teams, and if there's time at the end, I'll talk about our version. It's important, as you're talking with faculty, that you really sell the vision of what you're trying to do. We talk to our faculty about all kinds of service obligations, and faculty look at you and cringe when you ask them to do yet another committee. But Coursera is different. It's what I think of as public pedagogy, in the same way that we have public scholarship, lecturing for the Nashville Symphony, for example. Faculty are perfectly comfortable doing impossible amounts of work to write a textbook because they know that it is going to reach a lot of people and get their version of their discipline out of the hands of the broader public. Coursera courses are much the same way. They're having their take on what it is that they do spread globally and put into dialogue with people on the discussion forums. Don't hesitate to tell them how much work it will be. They need to know that going in. They are going to be the least present member of their household for a period of time while the course is in production. But they're going to be able to reuse that material for several years in a row. This becomes part of the materials they already have ready to load into their next course offering for their face-to-face class. And after you've sold them on this vision, then you need to tell them the practicalities, when their deadlines are, when they need to be meeting with their teams, and when it is that you are going to be going back to them and reminding them that, oh yes, we did actually decide to provide you with a TA to help with that discussion board monitoring. So when you're trying to garner faculty support, it's really important that you convey both the institutional vision but also the departmental good and the faculty members' own sort of personal opportunity to sell their ideas in order to get them integrated into the team. Now I'll turn it over to Mike, who actually is a little bit closer to the team part of this endeavor.
I don't know how you follow up. Your comments here were great. I need you to talk to the faculty. I'm Mike McCracken. I think we already said that. I'm going to talk about some of the issues that we've gone through at Georgia Tech in developing our Coursera courses and the way we're organizing and where we're trying to do things. When we started out with only a few courses, the first couple of them, 3 of them, I said, oh, this is easy. We had essentially a person dedicated to the development of the courses who was an online course development expert, instructional designer, and these courses went very smooth. All of a sudden, we stepped it up a notch, and chaos ensued. Because it requires a group of people to do more than a couple of courses. If you're only going to do 1 or 2, find top-notch people that are familiar with course design and online course production, and you'll probably be okay. I know my colleague at Duke, they've got about 10 courses going on right now, I believe. And we've got, right now, I guess I should say, we've got 11 that are in work or complete, 4 or 5 more in development. We're going to shoot for about 20 this year and about an additional 20 next year. Plus repeats of those courses are getting a lot of demand for repeats. You don't do that with 1 person. So we've organized ourselves into teams with instructional design, content design, platform expertise, and project management. I noticed 2 of my colleagues are here that are involved in this, but I want to introduce them and embarrass them. Platform support is the critical interface primarily to Coursera for working with their course development people, their course support team, and understanding and operating the platform. You will find faculty that will jump into the platform and understand it better than us, and then you will find faculty that don't know how to spell platform. And so you've got to be able to cross both sides of that equation. Project management is the person that deals with the day-to-day organization and how things get put together, when we need extra support, when we need to work with Coursera in particular, funding things. Every course will come up with some different questions, not necessarily that Coursera hasn't seen, but we haven't seen, and you need to be able to work them out. Peer assessment, how to put quizzes together. Can I do this on the platform? I've got this goofy software I want to use in my course. Will it scale to 10, 20, 30, 40, 60,000 students? Or will it explode on you when you try to do something like that? All of those questions have to be answered as you're putting these courses together. That's why the team has to be in place. It's more of a matrix organization, so I have expertise from various parts of Georgia Tech, but it's embedded in the academic part of the university. If you have a separate organization, or my belief, if you have a separate organization completely responsible for this, then the academic side has a tendency to not take on ownership of these courses. So you don't find school chairs harassing their faculty and getting their courses done on time or doing them at the quality level we want. Because in the academic side, normal brick and mortar courses, the academic administration is responsible for the quality of the product that they're delivering to the students. You want to maintain that same quality control is a bad word. Quality management mechanism that's in place on these courses. These are real courses that have huge implications on your university, as Cynthia mentioned about branding and things like that. It's very critical when you have people all over the world that may never have heard of you working on your courses. So lots of resources, a lot more resources than we thought, to be honest with you. And the management skills necessary to be able to operate in this environment. Typically in universities, you don't find people that have the kind of skills to be able to manage a matrix, complicated organization, much of which has nothing to do with the strict academic mission of the university. Okay, it's the content from the professors where all this stuff comes from. So, project management platform experts, instructional designers, content designers, production and editing staff, I put it in quotes, psychologists, and champions. And so, and all of these people need to have a significant expertise in herding turkeys. And a communications organization that understands what's going on. So this isn't your typical communications process where, oh, well, the president's going to do so-and-so, so let's craft the right kind of stuff we put out there. No, it's happening too fast. What I say to Daphne is I see her, if I don't see her for 2 weeks, things have changed so much in regards to what's going on in the environment at Coursera, I'm behind. And that's how fast this stuff is moving. We've been in this for about 9 months. We've had 11 courses. I've got 10 more in the can. I've got 20 more coming up. And we are platform agnostic. Okay? I'm done. I made it in 5. I'm sorry.
Well, unlike Mike, I'm going to fully take credit for all 11 of our courses. I'm all by myself. I think the best thing I can do here is probably share a little bit about our story as far as what we've done and hope that it maybe applies to some of you. I know that maybe it won't for some of your structures, and I think some of these things develop organically. But the best I can do is kind of tell what we've done and hope we take something from it. And I'll talk about some roles specifically. But when we first jumped into Coursera, I think we finally agreed sometime in July of last year, and we decided to do 11 courses and have them all run before this summer. And we did that without any online learning center or anything like that. Instead, we kind of leveraged some standing partnerships that Duke has internally. Some of you might be familiar with something called the Duke Digital Initiative. A center I work for, the Center for Instructional Technology, and our central IT group and some other groups on campus work together to try to bring experimental technologies on campus usually. But we use some of those same partnerships to try to figure out how we could handle these Coursera courses with existing staff. That has sort of changed over time. based on needs. So the first 2 Coursera courses we ran, it was mostly faculty members and consultants from our center who are kind of instructional designers of sorts, working closely together to make sure this course could run. And those were incredibly stressful, even though I think people really liked those courses. They took a lot of work on the faculty members' part, and I wouldn't underplay that at all. I do believe faculty members could do this all by themselves, some of them, but it would take them a lot longer if they didn't get support. So I don't overestimate any of our staff roles, even though I'm going to describe some of the different staff roles that have evolved, as really making these courses great. I really do believe they start with the faculty, at least in the way Coursera is designed right now. But I don't think they all have the time to put these things together, learn the platform, figure out the new things that came down the pipe from Coursera and all that. So we had this partnership with the Duke Digital Initiative. We kind of went along, learned as we went. Then we realized, well, we really need to use these CIT consultants, these instructional designers, more as project managers, like Mike has mentioned, and kind of work closely with the faculty to make sure that they're hitting deadlines, talk to them about overall pedagogical concepts. And we probably need some people, we probably need to hire some people to kind of be like Uber TAs. So sometimes, some of you probably talk in talks with Coursera or have already done this, where they say, you really need 2 TAs to help run a course. That is kind of true, but what we think is even better is having a staff member who's already trained in the platform, already knows how to get in forums, knows how to load up videos and all that to get in there. So we hired 4 what we call online course associates. That was kind of a political maneuver to not call them research associates and other things. You can imagine how that works. I posted that description and many of the notes about our team structure on the forum for this panel, so you all can go look at that whenever you like. And so these online course associates help instructors work closely with them, help them develop and deploy materials, help them monitor discussion forums. Sometimes we ask them to actually send faculty daily updates of some of the interesting things that happen in the forums, so it cuts down the faculty members' time from searching through the forums. And we divide them over 2 courses, so we think we can have 2 of them running per course. 2 courses running for each OCA we have. We also had a few other things come up. We realized we needed a copyright intern to help us clear copyright early on. One of our first faculty members tried to clear a ton of copyright on his own before even asking for help. So those are things that kind of evolved, and now we have all those things kind of greased nicely. We moved on to communicating with our faculty through listservs, of course, multiple meetings. We have a Sakai site set aside for sharing resources. And I've also recently, we've been using a lightweight task management tool called Asana to help plot out how we're going to have these courses developed now. And I think I have that shared on the site too. I took the Asana template and popped it all out in Word for you guys to take a look at our whole process if you really want to trudge through it. And I think that's all I have.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Smith. I'm the Manager of Instructional Design Services at the Center for Instructional Technology and Training at the University of Florida, as I've already mentioned. At the University of Florida, we began our first MOOC development in October of 2012, and the initial plan was to launch 6 courses by January, the first week in January. So this meant that we would be developing courses for a huge international audience in less time than we develop our on-campus courses. And this was also our opportunity to showcase the UF teaching and learning. So no pressure at all in a short time span. So the first courses that we chose to develop with Coursera had already been taught online, with one exception. And although they had been previously developed, they were completely redesigned to be more effective as a MOOC. Particularly maximizing peer interaction, global perspective, identifying no-cost resources, and obtaining copyright permissions on all the materials. So I'll share what we did in 3 main areas: staffing, communication, and the timeline, and how we'll be making adjustments to these areas moving forward. And I'll add all this information that I'm giving you now to the team structure subforum on the community forum, so that you don't need to write this down. So at the University of Florida, we have 2 central units that provide course production services. And we combine forces not only to even out the load of course production, but also to really share the learning. And this really wouldn't have been possible if both units hadn't really been interested in coordinating and sharing this experience. So if you're going to try to maximize your units on campus, that's obviously an essential element. So both units got together, and they consisted of distance and continuing education. And that group tends to develop courses for our off-campus programs and courses. And that unit consisted of 2 instructional designers and 2 production staff. And their typical course development load is about 30 courses at a time. This team developed one of the first 4 courses in our first round. My unit, UFIT Instructional Design Services at the Center for Instructional Technology and Training, has 6 instructional designers, and those people also served as project managers. One person that we refer to as a senior educational technician, that's the person that handles the actual kind of technology, building web pages, that sort of thing. And we also have some student help, 4 student ed techs, and those are our copy-paste people. They'll copy and paste content into the platform. And my group developed 3 of the 4 courses in the first round. And typically, the instructional designer, once the course launches, will monitor the course through its first pilot. I'm the manager of Instructional Design Services, and my colleague, the director of Distance Learning, Dr. Ken Nani, asked me to take the lead on the Coursera development. And so in addition to these people that we already had on campus, we hired a half-time instructional designer, a half-time video specialist, and a half-time graphic artist. Needless to say, the Coursera development required significantly more time than these people actually made up for. Oh, and we also had access to library specialists to help us with resource identification. One other thing that we invested in is we upgraded our existing video equipment. We purchased a switcher that would support the ability to do chroma key on the fly, because previously we had been having to do a lot of post-production work to do the kind of chroma key stuff that we wanted to do, and this allowed us to do it much more efficiently and quickly, and we also bought software to support that. So that was our existing software, and going forward, obviously we're not going to get more money to do this, but hiring the student graphic designer worked great. We actually have a graphic design program on our campus, and so we were able to, at a fairly low cost, get someone who was quite adept at churning out drawings and such for our course production very quickly. We just couldn't have done it otherwise without him. Also, hiring the half-time video person was one of the smartest things that we did. So that worked very well. So we'll keep on with that, and also the half-time instructional designer, even though the half-time instructional designer didn't really defray the time spent, I figure every little bit helps. So the next thing I think was a challenge was the communication. And the reality is that I think communication is always a challenge. So this was nothing different. So I would touch base with each instructional designer on a weekly basis. We had team meetings with both units about every 3 weeks, and one of the challenges with this is that not every member of both units would attend these meetings. Now, we didn't have every instructional designer and every member of both units working on all the courses. So, people that weren't actively working on the courses kind of felt, I guess, that it wasn't so important for them to be there. But the reality is that they weren't working on this batch of Coursera courses, they were probably going to work on the next one. So we really wanted to have them at those meetings, and that was a problem to not have them all. And also, we ended up having a turnover in personnel right before one of our course launches, so that was a bit of a problem too. We put together a listserv. This is something that Coursera recommends in their documentation. And mostly this was used for communication with faculty, and we were pretty careful not to bombard them with back-end information. For the most part, our faculty did not put content into the Coursera platform. We took care of all that. We took care of all the setup and so forth. The faculty really weren't interested in it and didn't have time in any case. We also used Basecamp for collaboration between the units, and that wasn't used very much. So going forward with our communication, we're going to have more frequent meetings, as much as I hate to say it, because I think that's going to be really important to us. We're going to ask that all members of both units attend these meetings. We're going to make better use of the Basecamp collaboration service. And we've got a Google Docs going that we can add best practices and things that we're learning very easily and quickly to. So that'll help us disseminate the information about the back-end stuff. The final challenge that I want to mention is the timeline. And I know nobody here has got any problems with their timelines. Our proposed timeline was shorter than we normally have for our normal course production schedule. So what we did is we ended up having to request some flexibility from the administration, and we did receive that. So we ended up having one course launch in January. So that course ended up having a development time of about 3 months. And then the rest of them launched in March, and that gave us a development time of, I guess it was about 5 or 6 months. One of the instructors, we started with 6 courses we were going to launch. One of the instructors let us know right away that she couldn't make the timeline, just wasn't going to work. So that course we dropped right away. And another instructor sort of strung us along, and finally we had to make the decision not to move forward with that particular course. Part of the challenge with this is the instructor who strung us along was the instructor that had never taught online before. So even though I worked really hard to try to explain how much work this was from the get-go, you know, they just don't believe you. They're like, yeah. Oh, I'm really good at this. I can do it. But it really is a lot of work, and sometimes they just don't believe. They're just like students, you know. They don't believe you, until they've done it, or until they hear from somebody else, some expert from outside the university. Oh, well, my local person doesn't know what they're talking about. So with the timeline going forward, we have a standard memorandum of agreement that we use with all of our courses. And to be truthful, we did not hound these Coursera faculty to sign this document. Well, going forward, guess what we're going to do? We're going to hound them to sign this document. Yep. And part of that is we're going to, I've asked for and received the ability to give a little more flexibility in the timeline. That way we can really work with the faculty to come up with something realistic as opposed to just an arbitrary timeline that the faculty member has no input into. So we're going to be more assertive about the timeline. And actually those quality assurance guidelines that we just got from Coursera will be very helpful with that. So in going forward, my key word is assertive. We have a set of procedures that we've developed over time, and they work well with our regular course production process. And we've honed this process over the years. So we need to stick to it. And in fact, when we deviated from our regular process, that's where we ended up having trouble. For example, we have a standard for our video production. Well, one of the courses, the first one that launched, as a matter of fact, that first course, we were trying to get it up in 3 months. The faculty member didn't have time to come into the video studio, so she recorded the videos on her laptop, at her home. Background noise, bad audio, it was terrible. And of course, with our 3-month timeline, we didn't have time to re-record. So we have a process for recording our video and making sure the quality is good, and we circumvented that, and that was a mistake. So if you have a process, think carefully before you make adjustments to it. So we have 4 courses developed. We're heading into our second round of production, and we are working on disseminating that information to our faculty. Last week we had a faculty showcase, and it was very well received. We were sold out with our on-site participants, and we had quite a few off-site participants attending through Adobe Connect. And in my opinion, just the interest in the Coursera development has generated so much enthusiasm and interest that it has been well worth the effort. And that's it for me.
Good. Now we want to know what you want to know. The floor is open for questions, comments, and discussion. Yes, sir.
Have any of you launched courses that were not completely prepared? In other words, you're running 4 weeks ahead of time, 3 weeks ahead of time, but you're not the full course captured by the time you've launched the course.
Several.
Yes, and don't do it.
Bad.
It makes Sunday evenings really, really dreadful if you're the person who's responsible for quality control. And I would say in the future, I'm going to want to have seen everything before I'm willing to flip the switch on the first week of class.
Any different opinion?
No, I agree with 100%. Sometimes you can't do that, but you try to make the rules more enforced and rigid to prevent it from happening, and then keep your fingers crossed. I've got 2 right now that are running that way.
Well, Anne, you don't like it, but what?
The risk of actually having it not ready on the day that it's actually meant to go, or the chance of something that's not been copyright cleared being included. We did actually need to go back and re-record something that had been up on the website for about an hour, but I caught it and we took it down, and it is now beautiful, so we're all good. But you don't want to put the university at risk of trouble by not really fully having vetted everything that needs to be looked at before it goes up. Yes, sir, in the back.
Hey, I have 2 questions. Maybe I'll say them both and you can pick. Or if they're both amazing, you can answer them both. Does anyone have any experience with designing a MOOC that wasn't a version of a previously taught in-person course, like something that was built specifically for the medium? And if so, I'd love to hear a little bit about how that process went. And then my second question is, I'd love to hear about how your content designers and your instructional designers interact with each other. Like, take a Tuesday at 4 o'clock, they sit down, like, how real nuts and bolts, like, how does that go? Does the content designer bring the stuff, and then the instructional designer tries to midlife it into how it's going to look online? Like, how does it work?
I'll answer the first one.
Okay.
One of our courses called Energy 101 is specifically designed for the MOOC environment. The professor who did it said this is a course I could never offer at Georgia Tech because it's not technically deep enough for mechanical engineering. But he said it's something I want to do. I feel it's very important that it's done to help people understand sustainability and energy. In fact, he says I taught them thermodynamics without them knowing it. And so it was developed from, he had thought about it for a long time, but it was developed from scratch, and it's not a course, it doesn't map to a course at Georgia Tech. And it took a long time.
Yeah, a chunk of our courses for the first round weren't courses that were previously taught either. I think we have a preference for courses that were previously taught going forward, but not because they would easily adapt to the MOOC format, but because they already have some content available to work with. Whereas if a faculty member is doing something brand new, they may be struggling for content while they're already struggling to produce it. But I think that's our main motivation for that preference. It's not really about whether something's ready for a MOOC or not.
It gives the faculty member a leg up on it saves them some time because they're already having to invest a ton of time on the MOOC development. If they at least have some stuff that they've already thought about that is already kind of in the hopper, it cuts down on the faculty commitment a little bit. They still have to rethink how they're going to do the course, and all the courses we did got completely redesigned from their original online incarnation, but at least the faculty member had already been thinking about that.
We've got a group of colleagues in the clinical sphere who are designing a course right now. One of the things they've observed is they had no idea how many PowerPoints they would be writing. That is, the form is so different for them going from the lecture class into the Coursera offering that they really didn't budget enough time for that course design. And that for them, they wish now that they'd actually use something that they taught as a team before. I think it's more complex when you're doing team teaching as well.
Thanks. And what about the second question, the interaction, like between your content and production?
Well, one of the things I'll just mention briefly, we actually have training for our faculty who are going to teach online, and we did not require our first round of MOOC instructors to take the training, but the second round we are requiring them to do that. So they come into their first meeting with their instructional designer with learning objectives for a module, with some sort of thought gone into what they're going to do. So they've had some pedagogy background before their first meeting. And then their meetings with their instructional designers are really about the pedagogy, this is what I want the students to do. We really, the learning objectives are such a critical element. We really spend a lot of time developing those. And then, kind of the rest of it, the instructional designer can really offer advice and recommendations on how to make it happen. So they spend a lot of time on those learning objectives so that we can make those recommendations.
Our model at Vanderbilt quite a bit different because we're still at the pilot phase. We don't have a permanent infrastructure, and we've not been large into digital learning before. Our Center for Teaching runs every other week meetings for all of the members of the Coursera teams, which would be faculty and graduate student, and then a couple of TAs. And then they're available for one-on-one consultation and have several of those over the course of the course development. In the corner back there.
So Jennifer, when you mentioned about the online courses, how you adapted some components for the MOOC, did you then bring those adaptations back into the online course environment?
Yes.
So did they improve the experience?
We don't know yet. Yes, all of the courses were designed with an eye towards redoing the UF version of the course to match the MOOC. And in fact, like one of the courses, going forward, the professor is planning on incorporating the Twitter and Facebook that has been established for the MOOC with her on-campus course, because she wants to have that availability of the global audience available to her on-campus students. So she's counting on that overlap between the two courses. So I don't know how it's going to work yet because those courses are going to be offered this summer. So we'll see.
We do very different. None of our MOOC courses are online courses. And the faculty as a whole have come back and said after the MOOC process when they went through to develop their online course, that the quality of their on-campus course is significantly improved as a result of going through getting it ready for prime time.
Yes, sir. Second row from the back.
Yeah, as a CFO, it seems for a free class, it's actually costing a lot of time and money to do one of these things. We've signed up to do 3 of these. I've got 2 questions. One, have you spent any time looking at what it actually costs to do one of the MOOC classes? And if so, would you mind sharing that number? And second, if you had, so you got to make decisions, right? We're a fairly small school with limited resources. If I look at what you outlined in terms of the team, who's the critical role without which everything falls apart? I realize in an ideal world you want the whole squad, but who's the one person without which you can't make it happen?
In the real world, it's the team, including the faculty member. It's like a surgical team. So you have a chief surgeon, and then you have the supporting staff. The patient would die on the table if you didn't have the right surgical nurse, anesthetist, and everybody else. So I can't point to one person. Obviously, the professor owns the content. So without the professor, you have nothing. On the other hand, without the rest of the team, you also have nothing.
I guess I should have clarified a little bit. I think we have people in current roles that can fill some of these, but it seems like there is a bit of external expertise for a school that doesn't have any online classes. I'm hypothesizing that the instructional designer is probably somebody that comes in and has a very specific set of skills that will come to bear in an important way. Am I thinking about that correctly? Or am I not?
No, the instructional designers are critical. We don't have an ed school. I mean, we're a technical university, so we don't have an ed school, or we don't have places like that where we can draw that expertise. So we've had to build that expertise because of the necessity of it. We have a very large professional education organization that develops our usual kind of online courses. They're a significant player and partner in what we're doing. But we found that some of the skills that we need for this world are a little bit different than what they have.
I agree. We don't have any online our undergraduate school doesn't really have many, I should rephrase, online programs, so we don't have an online center, and none of our instructional technologists are really specifically trained in online learning. So I think we found that it's been a good thing in some ways because they didn't have some presuppositions about how this should work. They just cared about the outcomes, right?
I will say one of the things we've really capitalized on at Vanderbilt is the graduate student population, that there is a really excited interest in the graduate students, and that cohort has provided us with technical skill and with much of the hands-on kind of work that has supported the faculty in their endeavor, and that wasn't a population that we'd originally had as strong a part of the team balance as what we do now.
Any sense on cost per class?
The published version that I've seen is about $50,000 per class. I wouldn't say that that's wrong, but we haven't yet tallied up the year's expenses.
I keep track of it on a second-by-second basis, and 15K is a good number. That doesn't properly account for the amount of time the faculty spends on the course. They spend a lot more time than you budget for.
Thank you.
In the stripes.
If any of you have already rerun courses, can you talk about the different workflow amount of time that goes into a rerun of a course that's already run on Coursera once?
Yeah, you rerun some?
Yeah.
We've rerun 2 so far. One good thing that we did was we stored all of the video materials and other things in a network-attached storage space. So we had all the raw files there too. When we reran both of the courses, they wanted to change things after it ran, of course. And if we wouldn't have had that, we wouldn't have been able to easily have help them re-edit videos and set things up. We're kind of struggling right now to decide how much assistance someone needs to rerun a course. It seems like the faculty member, as long as they're on board for the teaching part and getting it set up and taking care of whatever modifications they want to make, we can devote a few hours of an FTE's time to help them get that going and answer questions occasionally, but they don't need the devoted online course associate. They may pick up some TAs, and Coursera has a really strong community TA program that's kind of come on, and we've been trying that out too. So between those things, it seems to be working out okay. But that's our next kind of goal, is to decide exactly what we need for rerunning courses. It's been sort of ad hoc so far.
We've rerun one, and I've got about 5 that are going to be rerun in the fall. And we budget about 10 to 20% of the original development cost for maintenance prior to rerunning.
One of the challenges I know that we're going to face when we go to rerun our courses is particularly the 3-month develop course. It's going to take a lot more to rework it because we slammed so much stuff up to get it up in that timeline. So it was really not a very cost-effective way to do it. So we're going to end up having to spend a lot more time getting it reset to make it ready.
Sir, in the white shirt.
Yeah, couple of questions. Do you think it's critical to have some kind of a centralized system to store all the recorded videos and best practices, the things which would be probably useful for reruns in that case? And the second question is about learning analytics. Have any one of you gone and done to study more on the effectiveness, especially on the student performance? I know Coursera's analytics are basic usage statistics, as opposed to they give also raw data down. Have you mined that data to find out what are the best practices that encourages students to be engaged as opposed to drop off the course? Something like that.
I'll take that first part of that just because I just talked about it a little bit, but the whole idea of having a network-attached storage space was, we kind of evolved that into, we're going to put out an RFP pretty soon for basically an object repository, because we want to centralize some of those things, mostly because we've been doing flipping the class exercises with some of these materials too, and instead of having to have people re-upload them somewhere, we want to have those materials ready to go in an easy way. So that's probably something we've needed for a long time anyway, so it's going to precipitate that. I think it's really useful. When we set out on this experiment, we decided that this is probably not the right thing to say at a Coursera conference, but if Coursera goes away tomorrow, we wanted to have content that we had developed there and available for the faculty and for Duke regardless. So we were adamant that we were saving every single thing we could.
And about learning analytics? Anything on that?
We're just beginning our analytical work and developing our plan for how to go about that. But I have anecdotal data that is telling me that in a flipped classroom standpoint, which a lot of our guys are doing, the outcome is significant.
Thank you.
In the black there?
So I have two questions. One is actually related to the topic of this session. So I'll say the one that isn't related. Jennifer, I believe you said you had to cancel 2 courses.
Yes.
And I was wondering about public reaction to that. If there was,
Well,
then the other question I'll just throw out there and then I'll be done, is I've talked to a couple of people here about because this is about teams, administrative teams, about teams that have reviewed and approved new course requests, new MOOC requests. And I was wondering if you could describe your institution's, how that process works. Thanks.
Just real quick, the courses that we've canceled, we're still hoping to get them developed. But we're looking for faculty to teach them. The one course that dropped out early, we think we'll get that faculty member back to develop the course as she's got some more time. And the other one, we're just looking for another faculty member to do it. So they're not out of the running yet, but we're just reworking the proposal, hopefully.
Did you change the date?
Yeah, I mean,
To be announced later?
we never did announce a date on either of them.
Okay.
So they were both both TBA, and so they're just going to be TBA a long time.
Okay. Thank you.
In the black sweater?
I'm interested in what the workflow is like the first time you offer a course. How much time does the TA spend? How much time does the faculty member spend? What kind of technical difficulties and other fixes do you find yourself doing?
If you look at the document I mentioned
Yes.
with all the tasks outlined for what we handle, it kind of summarizes some of the things we've run into that we ask people to check for, and you might get a better idea of the duration and time impacts. It's kind of hard to say for every course. Every course is really different too.
It's a lot.
Should we address the question they had about choosing? I would just want to say we're getting ready to do our second round. We decided to do it differently because it was kind of dropped on us, and we just did it before, and we had some really great volunteers basically, and we worked it out. But for our second round, I think, and I suspect a lot of schools are thinking about doing it this way. We had a proposal process. We took those proposals. Our consultants worked with those faculty to help them get their proposals into shape. We gave them to a committee that Duke has formed. The committee decided which proposals would move forward. And now those proposals are in a phase 2 where they meet with consultants, get some training on Coursera, some better understandings of it. They're building some very mini MOOC modules. So they're doing like at least 1 or 2 videos and some, just so they get a feel for what it is, the time impact. We feel it's important for them to understand the time impact. And then after we have a sense of that material and whether they want to continue, then we're going to make the cut whether they continue.
Okay.
And we think that's going to work really well because I think a lot of our faculty were gung-ho originally, but they got in the middle of it and they said, I just didn't realize it was going to take so long to churn out an hour of video, you know.
We're essentially doing the same thing with an additional measure of a strategic set of guidelines we're using to develop a strategic emphasis on which courses we want to put up there. And so that will be part of our guidance as well as the specific factors Shawn talked about in this kind of proposal process.
Okay. Looks like our last question is going to be from the person in white in the back.
A lot of the discussion has been around the design teams, and I'm wondering, as a project manager, what is the workflow or communication process from the project manager position up to chancellor, provost, deans?
I'll speak as a representative of the provost's office. So our project manager is in touch with me about every other day, and sometimes 7 or 8 times over the course of a particular day, depending on how the week is flowing. But the formal report back, the provost wants to be updated at least every couple of weeks, and every time we hit a significant milestone. So we finished taking. Provost would like to know. The Chancellor asks for reports about every 4 weeks right now, so that there's a regular updating that goes on because this is a very significant institutional investment. So that's our response.
I meet with on a daily teleconference with our leaders of our project team to keep up to date with issues or problems, or every once in a while good news. And then we feed summary information to the provost about every week. I also have a student who spends every week scraping every discussion forum and puts it into a categorization scheme I developed for looking for problems that pop up in the courses. So we're watching the discussion forums very carefully to see what's going on with the courses as they're being run. We're done.
We're done. So please join me in thanking our colleagues.